What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're taking a look at the concluding chapter of the Godfather trilogy with part 3. Once again, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, written by Mario Puzo. Okay, let's waste no time, let's talk about it. Godfather 3, when compared to the first two movies, is the weakest link out of the entire trilogy. Now, does this mean Godfather 3 is a bad movie? I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's an overall okay movie that is just excruciatingly boring. Part 3 is a boring movie that has some good moments sprinkled throughout, but overall, I just find this movie to be an absolute bore. The story does not interest me. The overall story is unappealing and uninteresting, and it involves Michael trying to make his business legitimate, and it involves an association with the Vatican Church and things like that, and it's just an absolute bore. But the stuff concerning the family itself, that stuff is the best stuff. That's the best parts of these movies. That's the best part of this movie, I should say. But this movie does have a lot of weak links in it as well. So let's just go over this movie, pros and cons approach, get the pros out of the way first. Overall, with the exception of maybe a few actors, the overall cast in this movie is really strong. Al Pacino once again returns as Michael Corleone, and I like the direction that Part 3 was going with Michael's character. In Part 1, we see this black sheep rise to power. In Part 2, we see just how ruthless he can be within the position of power. Part 3 sees him pretty much wrecked with guilt over all the decisions he's made, including ordering the death of Fredo. He is a broken man. He's a man trying to repent his sins. He's a man trying to seek redemption. And I thought overall Pacino did a fantastic job as Michael Corleone, as this broken down man wanting to just redeem himself. I thought Pacino played this version of Michael, who is now in his 60s, to perfection. Great performance. Ain't taking nothing away from it. Diane Keaton once again returns as Kay Adams, and just like in Part 2, I thought Diane Keaton was really good in this movie. The chemistry that she and Pacino have is great. The scenes of Michael and Kay trying to make amends with one another are beautifully tragic, and yet, but they work so well. Like, you can tell that these two, even though their relationship is grossly strained, and Kay has nothing but utter contempt for Michael, you can tell that there's still a love between these two. And I thought Diane Keaton played the role really, really well. Really liked her in this movie. Talia Shire, she once again returns as Connie Corleone, and I like the direction they kind of take Connie in this movie. She pretty much becomes Michael's right hand, and she's pretty much his unofficial consigliere, and I like it. I really like it a lot, because Connie gets to show that she has a little bit of ruthlessness in her, especially with this whole plot, plot concerning Don Altobello, played by Eli Walsh, who was kind of like the movie's main antagonist, who was also the godfather of Connie. She pretty much orchestrates his demise at the end of the movie by giving him poison cannolis. So yeah, like Connie in this movie, so Talia Shire in this movie as Connie, no complaints. I thought she was fine. Andy Garcia plays Vincent Mancini, who is the illegitimate son of Sonny Corleone. I thought Garcia was fine in the role. I like the fact that he's pretty much being groomed as the next generation Don of the Corleone family. And I thought Garcia played his scenes really, really well. I like the scenes he has with Pacino and with Talia Shire. I thought the three of them have really good chemistry with one another. And I like how this movie is pretty much acts as an origin story for Vincent and his rise to power. Kind of in the same vein as, let's say, Godfather Part 1. So I thought it was actually well handled. It was well handled to the best of Coppola's abilities. So no complaints with that whatsoever. What else? La 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 la. Oh yeah, and the supporting cast in this movie that includes Joe Montana, who plays this character called Joey Zaw, who was kind of like an underboss in the Corleone family. He's pretty much the villain for the first half of this movie. I thought he was okay. His storyline's kind of just padded and throwaway, mainly because Zoe Zaw acts more as a foil for Vincent than he does for Michael, though Michael is in his way via association. But in the scenes that Montagna's in, I enjoyed it. I liked it. He has a pretty cool demise where he gets gunned down during the middle of a parade, so I got no complaints with that. Eli Walsh, who plays Donald Tabello, I thought he was fine in the role. He comes across as like this innocent old man, but he's got a mean streak in him. Since he ends up orchestrated this elaborate plan to gun down a lot of the mafia heads in Atlantic City in this very overblown, over the top sequence with a helicopter and a bunch of gunmen. It's an over the top scene, but it's okay. It's not bad. It's not. It's creative for a move for The Godfather. It's creative, so I got no complaints with that. You do have some, returning, legacy characters like Don Tomasino returns from this movie. Al Neri returns in this movie. Callo, who was Michael's right hand when he was exiled in Sicily, he returns in this movie. He has his own little subplot where he wants to get revenge for Tomasino after Tomasino was killed. So you do get some legacy characters from the first two movies who make their return in this movie, and I thought they played their roles really, really well. Now let's talk about So yeah, in terms of my positives for the cast, that stuff is good. Let's get to some story beats that I enjoyed. Like I said, the stuff with Michael, to me, are some of the strongest stuff. With him seeking redemption, like the scenes with him and Kay, are beautifully done. The scene where he confesses his sins to the Archbishop in the gardens, and he confesses to having Fredo be killed. Outstanding stuff. Pacino's performance in that scene is just heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. It's awesome. And those scenes are what make this movie feel like a Godfather movie. Not this whole boring nonsense with Immobiliari and corrupt church officials and the corrupt banker. That stuff is just flat out boring, unappealing, uninteresting. That stuff just drags the movie down, and that stuff drags this movie down to a screeching halt. And things like Michael, having to atone for his sins, kind of needs to be more center stage, because Pacino has a lot of great scenes in this movie. As I mentioned, the stuff with the Archbishop is good. The scene where he has the famous "Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in." That whole scene is just absolutely outstanding. And when the thundering in the background and he's screaming out for Fredo, awesome, just awesome, just heart-wrenching, great stuff by Pacino in this movie. Pacino, I can't say enough. He puts on a good performance in this movie. I thought he was great. The entire third act of this movie, I think, is the strongest act of this movie. It takes place during like an opera performance with his son Anthony, and I thought it felt very reminiscent of the first Godfather movie, and it's kind of parallel when Michael is giving communion to his godson, and you see all the execution of the five heads of the five heads. This third act, very, very reminiscent of the ending of the first Godfather movie. I kind of liked it, and it's cool. I liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. And I also just love the ending in general, where Michael sees in an assassination attempt on his life, has to see his daughter Mary gunned down, and that just completes the tragedy of his story, having to see his own daughter die, and the man who was seeking redemption just falls to pieces and is completely broken, and he just withers away and dies. So in terms of all that stuff, I thought it was good. I thought it was actually well handled. Now let's get on to my negatives. Mary Corleone, played by Sophia Coppola, she's terrible. Sophia is not a good actress. She sucks. And this movie hinges on this love story between Mary and Vincent, and I'm just not feeling it whatsoever. Garcia and Sophia Coppola have zero chemistry, and the whole thing of it being an incestuous relationship since they're cousins is really weird. It's really awkward. To go on top of just Sophia's horrible acting, she's not good. And I understand why Coppola put her in this movie. His original choices, through various tragedies and just things that happened, had his back against the wall, so he had no choice. But really, she's just not good. She's just a really, really bad actress. You have Bridget Fonda in this movie. You could have easily just erased the character she was playing and just have her play Mary Corleone. your troubles would have been solved right there. That's strike one. Another strike is there's no Robert Duvall in this movie. Tom Hagen is not in this movie whatsoever. His son Andrew Hagen, played by John Savage, is in this movie. And listen, if you're not gonna have Tom Hagen as a character, and you're just gonna do this throwaway line of him being dead because you couldn't get Duvall, okay, whatever, I accept it. But you have his son in this movie, and you do absolutely nothing with this character. He pretty much plays like a choir boy type of character, and he's completely underutilized and wasted. What was the point of having the son of Tom Hagen in this movie if you're not even going to utilize him? Just really bad. I didn't like that stuff whatsoever. That's another thing I didn't like. So Vincent's subplot with Mary did not work for me. Sophia Coppola as an actress doesn't work for me. The underutilization of just Tom Hagen and his son is completely underutilized. The lack of Robert Duvall in this movie is sorely missing. You have this other legal advisor stand-in who has no charisma. He's forgettable, and you can clearly tell his role was supposed to be for Tom Hagen, and Tom Hagen was supposed to have much more of a larger role in this story. Instead, because they couldn't get Duvall, you had to rewrite it, and it clearly shows that something is missing. The overall main plot of the Immobiliare stuff, it's boring. It drags this movie down to a screeching halt, and I just don't like it. And to me, the stuff with Immobiliare feels more like padding, and the stuff with the family that should be the A story. This whole movie should have just been that, with no Immobiliare nonsense. Like at the start of this movie, Michael should have been more legitimized, and he should have been working on just fixing the wrongs that he made, instead of having to deal with Immobiliare and assassins and threats on his life, all this convoluted nonsense. It just makes this movie just feel convoluted. And it just has the sense that Coppola truly did not want to make this movie, and it clearly shows. Because this movie is just flat out boring, and it's really uninspired. It does have some good moments sprinkled all throughout, and it does have some things that I do enjoy. But as an overall whole, Godfather Part 3 is vastly inferior to its two predecessors. So with all that being said, my final verdict for Godfather Part 3 is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. I don't hate this movie. I think as an overall, it is a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. But the overall putting together of this film and writing and the way it's constructed, I just didn't care for it. I just didn't like it. I don't hate this movie like most people do. I just don't mind it. And those are just my final thoughts on Godfather Part 3. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I will check you back next time for more.